Continuing right along, let's now take a look at how we can replace these sort of clunky file system functions we were using before in our photo sharing application with an actual proper database store, in this case MongoDB. Unfortunately, we've kind of come to the end of the road for now, where I can actually sort of type in the code live, because we actually have had to add a lot of code to support all this, and sort of I set up some infrastructure. So instead of actually typing all of this in live and debugging it for you and sort of kind of boring everybody to death, I'm just going to show you the code I've written and then walk you through it slowly. And then the stuff is all available in the GitHub repository for you to play around with. Okay, so I've actually created here under my Live Lessons Lesson 8 folder, I've created the app, and then I've copied over the app that we were working with in the previous lesson with the sort of static file handling, and you see here we have the static and everything. So the big thing I've done is I've added a new data folder. So first, let's take a look at package.json. And you'll see that in addition to Express and Async, I've now added version 1.2 of MongoDB in its driver. And then here in the data directory, I've gone ahead and added a couple of helper files. One is sort of backend helpers, one is DB, and then one is album to implement all of this sort of data code. So let's go here into db.js. And you'll see here, I basically do what we were just doing in the previous sections about creating the collections. So the very first thing I do is I have to have this init function. Before we run the app, I have to sort of initialize our database subsection or our database module. So what I do is I open the database here. That's this one. I open the connection. Then I create the collection albums if it doesn't exist, or get it if it does. I create the collection photos, or get it if it does. And then I save those out, and then I call back. So I have to first modify my server to call this init function. So what I'm going to do here in my server thing is, instead of calling app.listen right away, I'm first going to say require data db.js.init. Like this, and I'm going to say if then console.error fatal error init, and then console.error and then I'm going to say process.exit -1, and then we're done. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and listen because we're happy. Great. So that's sort of the big change we have to make to support this database subsystem. This backend helpers I've created, it's basically just a bunch of functions to streamline things. I created a verify function to make sure fields are existing. I think we've seen this before, a function to create an error. And then here at the very end, there are some sort of common errors that we'll throw. So I've just created a little helper function so I don't have to copy over these strings and everything all over the place. So the meat of our sort of backend is this album.js in the data directory. And the sort of functions we've seen before are sort of list all the albums. And again, all we have to do here is, let's go back to the DB file. You'll see at the very end, all I do is I just say exports.albums equals the albums collection, and exports.photo equals the photos collection. And so the cool thing is I can actually those are exported as variables on this DB module. So to work with them, I can just refer to them directly like this. So again, to get all albums, or to list all the albums, I just find and say get all of them. I can sort, and I've set this function up to sort of say you can tell me what you want to sort on or something like that. And then I have a limit and a count, and then I just pass the results directly back. I use toArray here since there are never very many albums, and I'm not worried about wasting a kilobyte or two of memory to load them all into a big array. Similarly here, we had the ability before to sort of view an album given its name, like Italy 2012. So what I do is I find the album based on that name. I immediately get it to an array because there should only be one result. And then I do some error checking and some sanity checking. And if I do get one result, I send it back to the caller here. Otherwise, I squawk and throw some errors. Other things we can do now in our new world is create an album. So what I do here to create the album is I first do some data validation, and I just make sure that I have all the data that I want. Then I go ahead and insert the document for the album into the albums collection. And I have some debugging console logs there still. Now, this is a rather fascinating line of code that I'd like to explain. In general, I thought it would be antisocial because I had to add the ID field because they just gave me some data from a user post, which just has the name, the title, the date, and the description, and I need the underscore ID field. I thought it would be a little antisocial to just add that to the data they passed into me because they might actually be doing other things with it later on. So this line of code here, the stringify and then immediately parse that object, is a very quick way of cloning an object in Node.js. So all I do is I clone the object and then I add the ID to that, and then I don't have to worry about modifying the object that they sent to me. Again, I do the write. I want that to be safe. And then once the item has been inserted into the collection, the other thing I need to do is make the folder on my local hard disk, because I am still doubling as not only an API server, but I am also doubling as a file server. So you see here in static, there is still the albums folder, and you'll see here that I have to make sure that I create the appropriate entry in that folder so that I can serve the files for that album. Once all that's done, I sort of tear everything down. If there was an error and I wrote to the database but creating the folder failed, I delete the item from the database. Otherwise, I can throw a more specific error if I detect that 11,000 and I know the album exists. Otherwise, if I don't know what it is, then I can just return the generic error. Or if everything worked out great, I just return the JSON object. The only other thing I need to really worry about then is adding a photo to an album. Again, I'm going to do a waterfall, and the first thing I'm going to do is double check all the parameters, make sure it's a valid file name that they gave to me. If I do, then I'm going to insert it into the collection, and since I've actually created this, where is this PD, this photo data? See here, I've actually sort of not done what I did in the other file, and that here I'm actually going to go ahead and just modify directly that. That's me. I guess I was being a little lazy and I didn't notice that. So I could have I can in fact just do this var pd2 equals json.parse json.stringify pd, and then here I can say pd2 like that. And now I can definitely, I don't have to worry about modifying that incoming photo object. Again, then I still have to do a file operation, and so here what I have to do is I have to do a file copy. And amazingly enough, the file system module doesn't have a copy, so I just I wrote a little file copy function myself. You can study that, and it's pretty cool. The other thing I've done is I've actually created a little file called local.config. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I've created this file in the same folder as the server.js called localconfig, and I like this for working on projects because that means I can set up sort of development and production environments and everything. So on a development environment, I can use localhost, I can set a port, I can set a pool size, I can set paths, and I could even say develop, build type dev or something if I wanted to have different logging rules or something like that. Then to include it, all I need to do, is I just say local equals require this local config.js file, and then I can just refer directly to the variables from the local config. So again, for the save path, I've actually put the folder location in the local config file, and I write to that, and then I can move things around without having to hunt through my code and find all the locations for those paths. Finally, again, I check the error and pass back either the data or the error from that. And so that's the basics of the backend and sort of the new structure I've had to set up to sort of move our system over to MongoDB. In the next section, we'll look at the APIs we have to add and then the handlers for that.